Yeah, I want to talk about the book. That's a good start off point, right? So I've been reading this book, The Everything Story by or about Jeff Bezos and Amazon, right? And it's really good so far. And it's really interesting because he and my wife Katie went to the same elementary school. It's kind of interesting. She was like in that program he was in, but later when she wasn't born at the same time as him. But it's really interesting because there was this. They were talking about how he went to this school in River Oaks here in Houston, and it was part of like this gifted program and so forth. And basically, this woman wrote this book in the 70s about gifted and talented education in Texas. And so she went to that school to kind of gather information about writing the book, because she's obviously talking about general things, I'm assuming. And they assigned her like a student to sort of shadow, right? And he was like 12 years old, and that ends up being Jeff Bezos was that student, right? And she's describing him, like it's a different author, not the one who wrote this book, but he's describing her description in her book, right? And just about him and so forth, and what he was like then as a child and everything. It was interesting because he was like, he had created some sort of thing he called an infinity mirror, where it's like had mirrors and stuff, and it was something he had seen in the store, but he was trying to make it himself and make it cheaper. And he was talking about, she was just kind of sharing about his approach and how he thought and everything. And it was just really cool. There was this one specific quote I posted about it, and he said basically like, oh, here's right here. It said, she recalls what one teacher said all those years ago when the author asked her to estimate the grade level that the boy was performing at. This is when he was 12. I really can't say, the teacher replied, except that there is probably no limit to what he can do given a little guidance. And I thought that was such a cool quote, because I look at my kids and I look at how they are, the way she's describing this 12-year-old. I'm like, dude, when my kids are 12,
it's funny because you've mentioned that point before about people are like, what grade level does he rank at? And I couldn't even. It's a different game
for Max. You mean
totally different? Yeah, for Max.
Yeah,
it's like it's not even.
It's like beyond grades now.
Exactly.
He's still not even 4.5. Like I don't know if I sent y'all that message I put on Facebook, but Katie said, is it audio switch? Is it switching back the video?
It's on you. Yeah,
nothing's changed.
Okay. It's just, I guess when you're talking, you can't see yourself. Oh, let me put it on. I'm gonna put it on my
gallery.
Sorry.
Yeah, put it on gallery.
There we go.
Now we're all equal.
I'm not seeing what you're necessarily seeing, right? Yeah.
Right.
But
what Katie put in the group?
Yeah. Well, she sent me a message. She sent me a text message, and she was like telling me like it's this little conversation you had with Max. And Max goes, because she was making bread downstairs, and Max goes, "Wow, that's an awful lot of bread." And Katie goes, "Awful?" Because like she hadn't heard him use that word like that. She goes, "Awful?" And he goes, "Well, in this context, it means too much." I was like, that's a 4-year-old. Okay. Most 4-year-olds, they can't even count. Like they can't even count to 5 or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, well,
yeah,
5, but you know what I mean?
But
they can't do basic math.
Maybe not.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. The interesting part is like, okay, yeah, he doesn't know what a grade 12 knows from the perspective of, like, does he know linear functions, but it's like his ability to regulate his emotion.
Hold on. But he's 4.
I know. So that's
when
what I'm
he's
saying.
8, he will.
But I mean, in regards to like grade level, right?
Yeah.
But what I do know is I've seen him regulate his own sugar intake and his own processing of an emotion better than
adults.
Better like than most people in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, how do you assign a grade level to that?
Actually, I'll tell you a cool story. The other day, it was Max and Seneca. They were downstairs, and we had bought him some little toys. They had come in the mail that day, so they were playing with them and everything. And it was like a set of toys that kind of they all form a set. And Seneca was going to go upstairs, I think, and take a nap, and she was going to take one of the toys with her, right? And Max was asking me if I could come play with him, like if I could take that toy and come play with him, right? And I was like, and then Katie had said to Seneca, she was like, "Hey, Seneca, why don't we leave the toy here? Okay. And then we'll go take a nap." Right. And Seneca was like, "I want to take it with me." And I said, "Hey, Seneca," I said, "you can." I said, "But Max would like us to play with it down here. So why don't you leave it down here? And then when you come back down from your nap, you can play with it." And she was like, "Okay." So she started walking over to Max going, "Here, Maxie, here," to give him the toy. And he looked at her and he goes, I don't want that. Right. And she was like, oh, so she's like, I'll take it upstairs. I'm going to take it upstairs. And Katie was like, no, leave it here. And she was like, no, I'm taking it upstairs. Right. And then I said to Max, Max, I said, and he was looking at me going, Cameron, I want you to come play with me with it. Right. So it was like starting to create this conflict, right, where they were going back and forth. And I said, Max, listen, I already explained to Cindy that we were going to play with it, to ask her to leave it here. But when you said to her, you don't want it, then she's like, okay, well then I'll take it. Right. And I said, so I'm not saying you need to you need to understand, like when you said that, right, that you don't want it, it's confusing. Right. And he's like, oh. And I said, Seneca, it's okay. Max just didn't understand that I was going to play with it with him when you were giving it to him, that we could play together. He was just telling you he wasn't going to play with it. And she stopped and she goes, oh, and she walks back to him. She goes, here, Maxie. Right. And then she goes upstairs with Kate. So it's like, we don't have to use this force or, share with, like, we never say, you need to share. We never do that. We just explain in that specific context, what, if you could, why, and so forth. You see what I mean? Versus just share. Like, that's such an arbitrary thing. People say that, like, oh, you need to teach your kids to share. It's like, well, do you always want them to share everything all the time, no matter what? Even if, you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. And it really just sets you up with this program of like, everybody else has a right to what I have. And I have to just, if you ask me for it, I have to give it to you, which makes zero sense. It's not practical, right?
But I remember when I first met you guys and just started to hear your philosophy on parenting, because I don't have kids yet. I was like, I want my kids to be like that.
Yeah.
So forever, whoever's listening, if you already have kids, okay, but especially for people who don't have kids yet, and you can course correct yourself, like, do you want your family dynamic to just look like, oh, just share, just be good to your brother or your sister or whatever, and everyone's frustrated? Or do you want that kind of setup for your family? Because it's not like Max and Seneca are special. Just Cameron and Katie apply what we're talking about and they use TechnoTutor. So it's like, it's so cool to know that that's an option.
I posted another picture on Facebook this morning. I came downstairs from the office. I was like doing some work before we had our last meeting. And then I went down there, and there he's sitting at the counter. Seneca was running around wearing her little cat suit that Katie had made her. So it's got this long cat tail, and she's running around. She sees me. She goes like, hey, Cameron. Right. And then I look over and Max is sitting at the kitchen counter. Right. And he's just like sitting like this. And I could only kind of see like the side of him. Right. So I like walk down there and I come out down the stairs, and I look, and he's reading that Bobby Fischer chess book. And he's just like sitting there, like looking at it, and he's going, and he like turns the page. Right. And for those who haven't seen that yet, I posted on my YouTube channel, which is just my name. It's like, I think my username is Cameron V Cope, or it's Cameron Cope. I'm not sure which.
But if you just type in Cameron Cope, you'll find it.
I think it's Cameron V Cope. That's my middle initial. But you can look on there. I have this playlist called TechnoTutor Co-Founders Kits. But I posted a bunch of videos over like the past few days of Max like doing chess puzzles and explaining them and everything. It's really cool. So you can kind of see, like, it's not like he was looking at the book and I took a quick picture. You know what I mean? He's reading it. He sat there for probably 20 minutes. I took a shower, came out, and he was still reading it. Right. So he's actually sitting there looking at it and everything. So it's just really cool. But
take us back to did you finish Katie's convo with you? And
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And if not, then go back to the Jeff Bezos point.
But the point was, like, when I'm reading this book, it's like when they're talking about him as a 12-year-old.
Right.
And then you think about most people's perception of Jeff Bezos, that he's like this, or like a Bill Gates or whoever, like these people are just like way next level. Right. But then I'm like, dude, my kids are going to surpass that. They're already surpassing it. Like when he was 4, like they didn't say in the book, oh, when he was 4 years old, he was fucking learning chess and solving chess puzzles and doing, you know what I mean? Like, and all the stuff that Max is doing. Like last night, I've been reading this book. I think I talked about another podcast, that Zone 23 book. It's really good. So I read that at night, kind of like when I'm falling asleep, after I read to Max. So we go to bed, I read to him, and then sometimes I'll turn off the light, he'll fall asleep, and I'll turn my like reading light back on, or I can tell he's tired. And I said, okay, I'm going to read, and he'll just lay there while I read silently. And then, and it was really cool because last night I just decided to, because I have a little reading light. So I turned that on, or no, I had the lamp on also, the side lamp. And he was like, after we had read a bit, I think we finished the book. Yeah, we were reading Charlotte's Web. It's the second time we read it. So we finished the book. And then afterwards, he was like, I can read Charlotte's Web by myself. And I was like, okay. So as I was reading my book while he was ready to fall asleep, he gets Charlotte's Web and he's just sitting there for a while, just like reading through it and then like looking at the pages and right. And it was really cool because at one point, actually right before that, actually, this is what happened. It was right before that. I was reading my book and he goes, why don't you read it? Right. And I said, well, I'm not gonna read it out loud because there's a lot of context you don't have. Right. So it's not going to make total sense to you, but also there's a lot of stuff that's just not appropriate for your age at the moment because you don't have the context to understand it. Right. So I'm not going to read this particular book out loud. And he goes, well, no, I mean, why don't you read it? And I was like, what do you mean? I am reading. He's like, I don't hear anything. Right. And I was like, oh. And I said, well, I was like, I don't know if this will make sense or not. I said, but I can read without saying the words out loud, like, and I can still understand it. And he was like, And I was like, I'm not sure if you can do that or not, or if you ever thought to do it before or not, which I know he can because I watch him do it. Like with that Bobby Fischer, he's like obviously looking at stuff and whether he's thinking something in his head or not, he's analyzing it and he's doing something like he's solving the puzzles. I'm watching him with a marker, right? Without saying anything out loud. But I just don't know if he was aware, you know what I'm saying, that you can do it, like aware of that, he's aware of it, right? So I said to him, I was like, let's try something. He goes, okay. I said, I'm going to hold up my fingers, okay, with a certain number of fingers. But before I do it, I want you to know what number it is, but don't say it out loud, okay? And then I'm going to ask you a question. So I said, okay, ready? He was like, he starts to laugh. Every time he knows that's like maybe some kind of fun challenge, he starts to kind of like giggle a little bit. He's like, okay. So I go, okay. And then I go, did you see what number it was? And you could see him like holding in this sort of like little laughter, right? Of like, yeah, I saw it, right? And I'm like, okay, now I want you to show me the number of fingers that it was without saying it. So I'm giving him time to like, not just real quick memorize it. I'm like kind of giving space, right? And he goes, and I said, okay, ready? He goes, yeah. And I go, okay, what is it? And he goes, and I said, what is that? Actually, he did like this, right?
Oh,
and
cool.
I go, what is that? How many? He goes, 3. And I was like, yes, exactly. I was like, so I don't know how you experienced it internally. I said, but somehow you're able to see how many I'm holding up. And then later you still know the information. I said, so that's kind of like how I read is when I read these books, I'm not saying it out loud, but I'm understanding what it says. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. And then it was after that, I said, okay, I'm going to continue reading now. And then he got the Charlotte's Web and he was like, I can read this book myself now. Right. It was really cool. So he's like in there for a while.
Wow, man.
It was really cool.
Dang.
So he transcended the fear of death at age 3 and talking about what thoughts are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what grade level is he at?
How do I know Techno Tutor works?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And then it's like, you'll see, you guys have met Seneca, but you'll see with her, she's following just right on track with him. Yeah. So she's only 2, so you're not going to see her doing the same thing he's doing right now. But in terms of everything he learned and when he was able to perform it, like when he could recognize the alphabet. And when I say recognize the alphabet, you guys know what I'm talking about, obviously, but I'll just say it since for anyone else listening. It's like, I was just talking to someone the other day. I don't remember who it was now. And I don't know if you guys were involved or if it was just me and somebody, but they were saying how, oh yeah, well, so-and-so, they knew the alphabet when they were 4 or whatever. And I was like, well, how do you know that? What do you mean? I was like, well, because he knew it. And I was like, just real quick. I said, when you say that, what do you specifically mean? He was like, well, like he can say the alphabet. I'm like, right. But could he recognize it? Like he could every letter. I said, because I talked to a lot of parents, like when I would show them TechnoTutor and they would say that, and then I would say, well, let's actually see. And I would put them on TechnoTutor and you could see very quickly at an unconscious level, the child didn't actually recognize it. They'd have to guess because of the way the technology works. It's actually testing to see if you actually know, like if it's in your database, not just like imagine you show a child a C and they're sitting there staring at it and they're like, C, right? But they're kind of guessing. You don't know for sure, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what a lot of times parents mean is like they could just say the alphabet. And then the person said, oh yeah, that's what I meant. Like they just know the alphabet song. Right?
Yeah. The first time I went over to your house and you were telling me like, oh yeah, you should see my 2-year-old. He knows that, he just turned 2 and he knows the alphabet. I was like, yeah, right. Like, cause I I know what that means. And I think I've said this on the podcast before, but like having grown up in a daycare, my family owns daycares, it's just like, I know what people mean when they say their child knows the alphabet. Their child can sing the ABCs, and that doesn't mean shit, you know?
Right. And then we got that great video of you
Oh man,
showing him the letters and like going through just like random pile of like those wooden letters, upper and
Like,
lowercase.
upside down. Like
You were
Yeah.
saying whether they're
What's
upper or
this?
lowercase. And then
Yeah.
you pulled up the 17 and he goes, 17.
dude, that's my
Right?
favorite part. That's my favorite
Yeah.
part. Cause I was like, I was blown away. I was actually testing him in that moment. Like,
Yeah.
while you guys weren't there, I was like, I want to see how much does he actually fucking know? And I was like, whoa, this kid knows shit.
And the thing is, like from the outside, somebody might watch one of those videos and be like, oh, well, he's some kind of genius or whatever. But that's why I put so many videos on my YouTube, because you can see, oh, he started here, and then there was that, and then he was that. And we're saying the whole time, we're using TechnoTutor. We just learned this in TechnoTutor. Now watch what he can do. It's like with the chess stuff, I'll show you guys later, but I took videos of him, actually of me going on Katie's computer, where it's his, section in TechnoTutor, and showing all the lists that he's done of chess terms. And it's like 12 lists of like, sometimes like 9-10 words each. And I mean, like every basic chess term, probably most people don't even know half of them at least, or even heard of most of them. You know what I mean? And so you can see like, no, he's learned all these words. So when he's looking at these books, when he's listening to these videos, like we have a subscription to chess.com. So he's going through himself. I post some videos of that too, of him going through the lessons and then doing the challenges himself. And some of them he solved faster than me. I'm like, I was like going to ask him, I'm like, okay, so what are you trying to, and then he goes, click. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay. You already did it. Like I was going to try to see if I could help him understand what they were asking, but he's reading. They're not even telling him what the challenge is. It says, okay, white is in this position. See if you can find the one move that escapes this and does that or whatever. And he can read it. Right. And, at the beginning I had to tell him like, make sure you read it. Cause he would be like asking me, okay, what am I trying to do? And I said, well, read it. And he'll read like the last sentence. He wouldn't get all the context. And he'd be like, well, it says white needs to capture. And I'm like, okay, but read the whole thing. Start at the beginning. I said, you're going to have self-discipline of reading everything in it to get the whole picture. And then as soon as he started doing that, then he started getting it. And so, having that one-on-one, with me and with Katie, each individually and sometimes together, but each individually, that is the most important thing. I mean, that in combination with TechnoTutor, but I mean, the other part of it is that one-on-one, because the stuff that I'm telling them, like read every word and read the whole paragraph, don't just skip to the end. That's stuff that in school, it's like they're trying to teach you that. Number one, it's already way too late because you're already too old to really change your real habits or anything like that, right? And mostly, or generally speaking. But having that one-on-one to sit down and explain that one point, and then it's like I don't ever have to tell him again. He understands now. Oh, you need to read all of it because it's not necessarily obvious. You know what I mean? That you should do that. It's something that you have to be explained to, right?
That's a good point, because just that point of by the time they get to school, they're already too old, right? Like parents don't realize you're the teacher for the first few years of their life, your child's life. But they do on some level get that like, oh, I got to discipline them and all that stuff, right? But then they don't take that to the point of like ensuring your child is someone who's effective and knows things. And then they just end up becoming this like authoritarian who just tells their kid what to do and expect their kid to follow. And then they're going to like just, all right, and then we'll just put you in school and the school will figure out the rest of that stuff. And then they want to blame the school for like, oh, this school is terrible. They're not teaching them. It's like, you did that. You put your kid in that position. You didn't help them when they first started out. You didn't ensure that they knew all that stuff. And they're like, well, I put them in this, preschool program or whatever, and they're supposed to learn all this stuff. But like, no, but that's your responsibility. You can't leave that up to someone else. How do you know that they can actually teach your kid? Like especially if you're feeling like you don't know how to do that. And then the other point of that is, if you just become this authoritarian to your child, then how do you expect them to actually, number one, see themselves as equal to you, but number two, actually respect you, right? Because it's like look at what goes on like in the States over this last year, right? Over the last year, fuck the police, right? Fuck the authority, right? That's all everybody's been saying. It's like that's not somebody that people want to listen to.
Yeah.
Especially if, sorry to say it, but like especially if you're a low vocabulary person. Meaning,
yeah,
like,
and with your kids, it's like, why are they listening to you?
Yeah.
Is it because you're their parent? Is it because you withhold things from them and threaten them or take things away or punish them if they don't, or whatever the case is? Like, that's not why our kids listen to us.
Right.
Because we don't do any of that. We don't threaten. Right. We don't punish. And I've talked about this at length in other episodes and so forth, but we don't do any of that. We want our children to be someone who listens because it makes sense, not just to us, but in any case. Right. And so what does that mean is I have to become someone that's worth listening to. Right. I have to become someone that other people want to listen to because they can see within what I'm saying, not just over time, but they can see in that moment that what I'm saying makes sense. So I'm not putting the responsibility on them. I'm putting the responsibility on me to actually make sense and to not use force and to really explain things. But then, of course, the limitation you're going to run into, whether you're a parent or whether you're just a person in reality trying to communicate with other people, you're going to run into their limitation and their ability to process what you're saying. So you can be the greatest speaker, the best communicator, but if they can't take in what you're saying, and what does that require? They have to have the same definitions of the words that you have. Because if they have different definitions of the words, they're not going to understand what you're saying from what you mean. Do you see what I mean? And the thing too is if everyone had an equally effective vocabulary, you wouldn't really have to explain much to each other. What you would have to explain would be like if you really focused and created something that no one else created, or maybe a small group of you created, then to explain that to everybody else and the application and the mechanics of it and why, then that would make sense why you would have some knowledge other people don't have.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. Because like when you're speaking to somebody who's within your like industry, let's say, and you've got the same jargon, you're not thinking about, I have to explain these things to them. You're just like, you're like, oh, and then this account happened and blah, blah, blah. And like you use all the right terminology and you expect that they're getting it versus like that same specialist. Like when a doctor talks to somebody, they don't go with all the like technical jargon. They're just like, your leg's broke, you know?
Or if they do, they know the other person's not processing it. And it's more like you can't question me. Just what I say, because I just overwhelmed you with all this stuff you don't know.
Right.
My favorite example is like in the government, because Maylat's a speechwriter, right? It's like all these acronyms and it's namely that. And she's saying them. She's like, oh, why do they have so much bullshit that it's like you then have to learn each acronym to then be able to tell somebody else, and the likelihood of them even understanding the acronym is very low. So it's like this constant education process about what the SVCDS is. You're like, okay, got it. And so like the 2 points that I see is the 2 reasons why your child wouldn't listen to you is because one, you've done this punishment reward thing that child didn't learn that that you're somebody worth listening to because of the value that you provide. It just becomes, you keep forcing me to do stuff that I don't want to do without educating me on why I should want to do them. And yeah, it kind of sucks. So I don't want to listen to you anymore. Oh, I have to get punished and then I'll go do it. The other reason is you're actually misguiding the child. As in your education is saying, hey, you should do this when they shouldn't. So in other words, you can be, that's why it's twofold, right? It's the emotional aspect that you have to be taking a part in yourself, but it's also which is education. And the other aspect of education is actually being knowledgeable from the context of, okay, I actually know how to manage my money. I actually know how to work through my emotions. I actually know what would be best in terms of diet, right? It's being a holistic human being. And so that's the cool part about, I mean, being at your house, it's like, you guys have taken the time to educate yourselves in every practical matter, and not to the furthest extent, right? Because you do it as it comes up, right? So that process isn't like you're telling him something where he's like, yeah, but last time you told me something, you were wrong and I got hurt. Even if that wasn't your intention, it's like they're not being educated in what would be best for them. So that's the twofold. It's like, are you doing this do it because I'll reward you, or do it because if you don't, I'll punish you, right? Or don't do for both of those things. Or is it like, hey, do it because this is what makes sense, and then it actually doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You're like, oh crap. Both of those will end up undoing the innocence of a child.
Yeah, and causing them to lose trust with you, right? And then so people would have that objection of where they're at right now with their kids or their family. There's nothing they can do. But I saw this really cool quote. I posted it on Facebook, and I don't remember the exact wording, but it basically said one of the most challenging thing to do is in the midst of a problem or a crisis to start solving the problem.
Wow.
You see what I mean? And
Yeah.
that should be a warning in a way to prevent the problem from occurring, but also to realize, like, within the statement itself, it implies that you can do it, even though it's very challenging. So don't give up just because, oh, well, it's already a problem. It's like, no, start applying yourself. But the other thing too is Katie and I didn't grow up with this. So we had to unlearn a whole lot. And it's a constant process of not assuming that, oh, you're good. Everything you do and say is perfect and think is perfect. It's like questioning yourself and being able to challenge points that come up automatically before you take them out or before you do them or say them or whatever it is. So for those who don't have kids yet and want to have kids, it's really cool because you can do a better job, actually, because it's not about following me or Katie. That we're not suggesting you just do everything we do. It's more like taking the principles and seeing, we're giving examples of how we're applying it so you can see the result, and then saying, okay, well, what are those principles? What are those concepts that you guys are applying? And then learning those principles and then applying them for yourself. So it's not like we're saying you should say X, Y, and Z to your kids. It's more like, okay, why don't we lie to our kids about Santa Claus?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because if we lie, then they're not going to understand that in reality, people can't fly around on sleds and deliver chimneys down people's rooftops in 24 hours, every house in the world. Like, if your child believes that, they have to be stupid to accept it, or they have to be like, this doesn't make sense, but that person is saying if I don't believe it, then I can't get these presents, so I'm going to go along with it. It's like, either way, is that what you want your child to do when they're in society, right? And it's really cool. This other book I was telling you guys about, Zone 23, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's like society is divided up into normal people. They're called normals. That's like the derogatory term for it, right? Normal. And then antisocial people. And the antisocial people live in the center of the city in what they call the quarantine zone.
Oh.
And it's like everything is really shitty, like dirty, grimy. It's like they live in like apartment complexes where it's like they're hundreds of years old. This is like in the future. And so like half the shit doesn't work anymore. And it's like you share one toilet and like you can like walk through the walls because there's like holes. I mean, it's like, imagine like just, it's almost like it's a war-torn, situation or something, right? And then around that, there's the city center is what they call it, which is like the people in the center can go in there to work. Some of them, if you're like not totally antisocial, there's like 3 levels of antisocial. And then out of that is the community part. I don't remember what they call that part, but it's like where like the normal people live. And it's really cool because they explain how the normal people, what it is they just don't ever question anything. And the antisocial people, it's like they question stuff. They don't just go along with it, right? And that's kind of part of the theme of everything, right? But parents think that by doing these things like Santa Claus, just as an example, whatever it is, they're teaching their kids to be normal. You know what I mean? It's normal to like Santa Claus. It's normal to watch Disney TV shows, and it's normal to do this, and it's normal to go to school, and it's normal to do all that. And it's like, yeah, it is normal. But what does the word normal mean? It doesn't mean good or best. It's like a mathematical term. You know, it just means it's the normal, just means it's like kind of like the average in a way. Doesn't mean that it's the best thing.
The most common value.
Exactly. There's like many different contexts of what the word means, but it doesn't mean actually what you think it means. Like,
Makes
oh,
sense.
normal means that's how it should be.
Right.
Right. But the reality is people look at it and say, well, that's just the way it is. So that's how we're going to do it. But they don't. And see, the thing is too, it's not about, well, if people always say, if people would just realize this, it's like, but there's a reason they don't. Like for my kids, if I don't ever say to them, well, you should know that.
Right.
But they don't. If they did, they would act as if they knew it. So it's my responsibility to make sure they understand it and integrate it. And that's why TechnoTutor, the whole point of it is so that you can increase your and the child's vocabulary ability, their processing ability, so they can understand more information. And so what you see as possible with the normal child is just because you're not able to, on your own, as a parent, as a school system, whatever the context is, without TechnoTutor, you're not able to rapidly increase their ability to process higher and higher levels of more complex information. So with our kids, you're just seeing the result of us directing that process. So it's like they can understand more at a younger age. So it means that they more effectively learned how to use the toilet. They more, like just yesterday, no, it was this morning, I think. Seneca helped me make my coffee, right? She scooped the beans into the thing, right? And then she asked me for some kind of snack. So I cut up strawberries and I stuck the strawberries on the end of a fork. And I had like 3 different forks and I laid them out with like a strawberry on it just for fun. And after she was done eating, I was over there, like, I think I was putting some water in the kettle or something. I was doing something else like away from her. I looked over and she had gathered up the forks after she ate the strawberries and she went over to the drawer and was putting them back into the drawer. You know, like she is taking responsibility for that. Right.
Yeah.
And then actually I saw this morning when I was going back upstairs, she had finished her breakfast and Max was already on the floor playing. And she took her plate and his plate and she stacked them together. And she said, Katie, and Katie looked over and she was like holding her plates up for her.
Wow.
Right? And it goes 2. She's not even 2.5 yet. Right. That is normal.
Yeah.
That's normal when, and the reason why it was significant to me, these points, because they kind of take it for granted. But the only reason why I made a point of it was because Mayor had sent me a text earlier today of someone he knew. I guess they had posted on somewhere. And it was like a picture of their kid's little table. And there was like a chair and then there was like a plate or something, whatever. And they had made a comment. They're learning so much at daycare. Normally there'd be a mess on the floor, but not now. That's so great. And Mayor had made a joke like, you know, like, wow, I wish I could learn so much. Like, this is crazy, right? And I'm like, why? Think about it. Like, as a parent, your child comes back from daycare and then suddenly they're like putting their dishes away, right? Or whatever it is. Why weren't you able to teach them that?
Yeah.
And also, why are they doing it? Do you know why? Like, do you know at the daycare if they were like, you kids don't get to play if you don't put your stuff away? And so you do even know the reason why they're doing it? Because I know the reason why my kids are doing it. It's not because we've threatened them or anything.
Right.
Because we've explained, hey, when you take more responsibility for these things as you're able to, it frees up everyone else to do stuff. And as you get older, you'll do that as a sign of you taking responsibility. Everyone else does it. You'll have more time to do other things together, for example, right? Yeah. So just as one point to consider within it, right?
That's a good point to consider. Go ahead, Mitch. Go ahead.
I mean, I remember that back at school, like how I was taught manners, for example. It was like, okay, be a good boy. Like, this is what a good kid does, is you go through the lunch line and you don't shout in the lunchroom and all that shit. And it's like, that's impulsed into all of us.
Right.
Well, not all of us, thankfully.
Right.
But I just see how if that's not directed, like now, that kind of stuff gets played out on your kids. And so
that's such a good point. I forgot about that. Like etiquette and manners and all that stuff. That's so cool.
Yeah. Dude, Katie was talking to Katie this morning and she was like, she was telling me about that thing we were talking about the thing with the text, right? Where he said the word awful, right? And we were just looking at the kids like sitting on the couch together. And she was like, you know, think about all these parents like putting their kids in school, daycare, getting impulsed with the mask and like being afraid of people. She's like, they're going to be so fucking socially like ineffective. And I'm like, dude, my kids, they're going to be the leaders. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Imagine you could take your children and like if you'd actually read all these kind of books, like I'm reading this one, I've read the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and all these things, so you can see how all these people were when they were kids. So it's like, imagine you could watch your child go on the track where you know for a fact they're gonna be like the Jeff Bezos or the Bill Gates or this person or whatever. You can see it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like imagine LeBron James. Everybody knew he was gonna be like LeBron James when he was in fucking high school.
Yeah,
you could see it. It wasn't like they were like, whoa, where did he come from? Like, we just didn't know about it because we weren't in his environment back then, right? But his parents, they could see it.
Yeah.
I remember just kind of like at the very beginning when he was like 2, right? And you're saying these things like, imagine what he's going to do when he's like 8, 12. I'm like, how does he know that? How does Cameron know that? But when I see a 5-year-old playing soccer, I will know how great they can be.
You can already see like that kid's going to be good. Yeah.
And the reason is because I've studied soccer. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. It's just exactly what they do to select the people who will become part of the academy that they'll train to become part of Barcelona or Real Madrid, like the big soccer teams, right? So it's like, yeah, now it makes so much sense to me about, it's like the benchmarks of what a child is capable of. And the cool part is now it's just like this, right? Because at the very beginning, the seed is being grown at the very beginning. But in terms of the ending point, it's like completely different, right? Where if you looked at me beside Jeff Bezos as a 1-year-old, probably wouldn't notice much of a difference, right? You would notice differences, probably not much of a difference. When we were 4, probably you'd notice a big difference. Now you can see the immense difference.
Yeah, and maybe not that much of a difference at 4.
True.
And I'm only saying that because someone's going to take this the wrong way, but I'm going to say it. Jeff Bezos is not that much better than the average person. I'm not, now you're saying, what are you talking about? The results. Like, you just don't understand what humans are capable of.
Right.
He's only like this much better. That's really all it is. So when you go back to when he was 12 and you compare him to other 12-year-olds, you can see some difference. Like, there's definitely a difference there. But you go back to 4, like, what could he do? Could he read when he was 4? Like Max could? Could he play chess? Could he do any of those things? Right? I don't know. Normally, the only people who are going to be playing chess at the level Max is, at the age he is, those people are going to be like your fucking Magnus Carlsen later.
Or your Bobby Fishers.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not even expecting Max to do that, only because I'm not expecting him to have a hyper obsessive focus on that one activity.
Yeah.
Because my goal is to support him to understand you're here to do something that's best for everybody. And I don't necessarily know the exact detail of what that is, but my point is to instill the principles into him so that he can understand and look at it for himself and see, where can I contribute in the best way possible? Because just getting really good at chess is not it. You know what I mean? Because you imagine if you could have directed that intelligence into something that would make a difference for everybody in the world versus just some ego point for a bunch of other people to get off on.
Oh yeah, I'm sure so many people listening to this, myself included, had the thought at one point or another, or you see a lot of people do this of like, I'm going to take my kid and I'm just going to make them the best soccer player, basketball player, whatever player, piano player, like just get them really focused in on one skill and just make them unstoppable at it. But like you said, it's like, what about the rest of reality? Like, does that really support that person to have the best life?
Look at that for a moment.
Become pro athletes and the rest of their life is poo-poo. And after they no longer can be an athlete, things kind of get a little wobbly.
Well, look at that point, right? Don't you think if we wanted to, we could say, okay, we got the techno tutor, we can see the results. Let's hire a chess tutor, and Max, you're doing chess for the next every day for 4 hours, and whether you like it or not, because we're going to make you into a chess genius. Don't you think we could?
Absolutely.
The fact that we're not doing that should tell you something, because we're showing everybody the principles more important. What's best. You see what I mean? We're not trying to force him into something, but we also recognize there are certain things that you need, because the opposite spectrum is the people who are like the unschoolers who are like, well, I'm not going to impose anything on my kid. They're like, it doesn't matter if they don't read until they're whatever. It's like, I see this, there's this famous, I don't want to say her name, but anyways, there's this woman who's like, she's like famous in the unschooling thing. Right. And she has like a daughter who's like, she's a young woman now. And it's like, her goal is to become like a marine biologist. And it's like, okay, but this unschooling thing you're supposed to be doing where you're guiding them in their creative full expression as human beings and all this stuff, and she just wants to become a marine biologist. Like, and she's 18 years old, and it's like, that's it, right? Where's the principle within that? And I'm not downing on these people, you know, she can still be successful within that potentially, but is that because the parent gave them the tools to do anything they wanted? Do you see what I mean? So with the kids, our focus is on what are the fundamentals, the symbols, right? Letters, numbers, punctuation, math symbols, things like that, integrating that in the very beginning as early as possible, not forcing it. There's no force required. That's the thing. So even the unschooling, where it's like they're reacting to forcing your kids to do stuff, we don't sit down and be like, Max, you need to practice reading right now, as I'm explaining to you guys. But why is it that he wants to? He sees us doing it. We read a lot. We talk about reading. We explain the value of it. You see what I mean? And then there's things he wants to know about. So he sees that he wants to do it. No one's forcing him to do it.
Let me ask you a question, because there's a good point that you mentioned, a really significant point about being somebody that other people want to listen to, including your children, right? Being somebody that you mentioned in a video that you made a long time ago of, I don't care if my child loves me. That's not my priority. My priority is that he's effective. When he grows up, he's effective in this world and he sees the value of the common good, doing what is best for all. But what just makes sense is the natural result of that is Max's love for you as, wow, I'm really grateful that you made me very effective. Thank you. Right. He doesn't owe you anything, but it'll be natural of him to give. Right. So just kind of circling back to that point, because obviously, like you said, like Mitch said, you guys weren't raised with this.
Mhm.
How do you think you would be as parents, you and Katie both, okay, if you didn't find all this stuff? And you guys had kids, because I know that you guys probably didn't plan on having kids at all. But how would you be?
We probably wouldn't have kids on purpose. We probably would not on purpose have kids.
Right.
But you know what's really interesting? I keep pushing this for a reason, this Zone 23 book, because I really think everyone should read it. But what's really interesting in this book is that, you know, it's talking about the normal people and then you have the antisocials, right? I would have been the antisocial. Because I was the kid on the way home from church telling my parents, like, you realize God's not real, right? Like, made it up. Like, come on. And my dad would be getting so pissed off at me, right? Oh, you just think you know more than me. I'm like, well, it just doesn't make sense, right? So what's interesting is in this book, the people in the normal society. So just to give you context, in the book, there's the people in the normal society who were not born after a certain discovery was made. And that discovery was that they could edit out for a child who was being born, like, you know, in vitro fertilization, they could edit out the gene that creates antisocial behavior.
Oh,
Okay?
shit.
Now, the way they market it is that it's the thing that makes you, like, you know, aggressive and hate people and antisocial. In reality, what you find out is that it's really more about accepting things, and conformity is really what it's about. Okay. But the point is, there's people who were born before that discovery was made and they're still alive. And slowly but surely, they crack, like they can't live, like they're all medicated so that they don't, you know, it's like they're basically just all medicated. Like you do with these boys, you put them in school and put them on Ritalin so they'll fucking just do what they're told. And then for some people, they get to be 20, 21, 22. And you know what happens? Smoke a little, right? That's my word. Right? And then they snap.
Oh, shit.
Full blown psychosis. I've seen it over and over and over and over.
You're talking about real life.
No, yeah, in real life.
Right,
This is
yeah.
a real thing, right? So in the book, that's what happens to people. So it's like they medicating themselves, and there's some people where it's like, you just know they're like on the edge. And what happens is when they eventually crack, and it's like something like they say like something sarcastic, you know what I mean? Like it's even that level, that's like a sign like, uh-oh, they're not responding to their medication anymore. So they call them like unresponsive, right? And then these people, they get removed out of society. They get all of their bank accounts, everything gets removed, transferred to like maybe like their husband, if their husband hasn't cracked or whatever, depending on the situation.
Wow.
They basically get deleted out of society and they get sent to the quarantine zone where it's like, bye-bye, on your own. Right. And so the reason I'm sharing, and those people, by the way, so then within the quarantine zone, there's all these people and they call them terrorists, right? That's what they call them. Okay.
The people, everybody in that zone?
No, the people who in that zone are also questioning the system.
Okay.
They're trying to fight against it, right?
Hmm.
So it's like the people who generally were at the level where they cracked, they're called transplants. They weren't born into that area. They were put in there and they basically couldn't handle normal society anymore, right? And the book is about this whole movement of people trying to fight against the society, right? And so to answer your question, it's not even what kind of parents we would have become. I know I would have become one of those people that was just trying to fight society because I had seen enough that it's like none of it made sense. That was why I started even questioning things in the first place. And so the kind of parent I would have become would have been just someone who's really spiteful, really annoyed all the time. I would have been struggling for survival and then taking that out on my kids and always feeling like I can't pursue my passion and my purpose, whatever that is, which I wouldn't know what it was. And it's because of my kids. And I would have just become my parents, bottom line, because that's kind of like my parents. I have a parent who's like that. And then I have a parent who's just everything just fit into the system. And even my other parent, who was kind of like the rebel type person, eventually just accepted everything. Right. And that's probably what would have eventually happened is I either would have accepted it or just gone crazy completely or.
No,
But that's happening to a lot of people even right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Right. But unfortunately, they're getting wrapped up into all kinds of bullshit, literal conspiracy theory type shit instead of, hey, there's a real solution. It's called take responsibility, change yourself so you can do what's best for all, stand up in politics, just like the people you're complaining about are doing. Stand up, do it the legal way without having to resort to violence and shit like that. And just show other people, hey, when you apply these principles, when you change yourself, guess what? Your life gets better. Why? Because you're creating to a certain degree the reality around you through your participation. Now, you don't create all of reality by yourself because we're in a collective. But doesn't it make sense as you change yourself, you start to be able to respond and adapt to the collective reality differently, right? And then as we all change by being the example and showing other people how to do it, then the collective reality can change as well. But it's definitely not going to happen by fighting it, you know? And so, yeah.
Wow, I see myself. I was on a very similar path to you. I mean, you're just older than me, right? But like being so fed up with the state of the world and just feeling it would like fluctuate, right? Because I was totally in the energy. So it'd be like on a really good day, I was like, maybe there's hope for the world. To like, there's no fucking hope, and just ping ponging between that or pinballing, whatever you want to call it, until I came to find you guys. It's specifically Techno Tutor, and then when I had Techno Tutor, you guys then said, okay, here's DIP. Here's how you can actually pull apart what's going on inside, keep what's best, and then. Because that whole piece about the effective education, like that was the missing piece I couldn't see because I wasn't effectively educated. And I went to like a fairly good school in one of the top ranking states, apparently, according to the Department of Education.
By the way, just to be clear, okay, I was in the gifted and talented program all the way up through high school. I went to a college prep, very elite, one of the most expensive schools here in Houston, Texas. I went to the United States Air Force Academy, which you have to get a personal recommendation from your congressman or senator, like national level, to even apply. Okay. I was a National Merit Scholar finalist. There's only 16,000 of them every year out of the million fucking high school students. So I'm saying that because I had it's like when I read this stuff like with Jeff Bezos, he was a National Merit Scholar. He went to private schools. He went to a college prep. I'm like, wow, he went to an elite school. He went to Princeton. But what's the difference? He was programmed to be in this position that he's in. Why? Because in that position, is he going to challenge the system or no?
Yeah, he's not. He's going to perpetuate it.
He's going to perpetuate it because it's funny. I was reading the part where he was talking about how he decided to create Amazon. You know how old he was when he created Amazon, or when he left his job to go start creating it? He was 30. Right? and he was working at this place called D.E. Shaw in New York. It was like an investment finance company, kind of like a Morgan Stanley, but their approach was using computers and analytics. So they weren't just like finance people; they were more like computer science. It was created by a computer scientist, right? Who went to become a billionaire in his own right. And Jeff Bezos was there, as one of the people. He was like leading one of their call it third market division. I mean, he's a smart guy. He was doing well. It wasn't like he was just some random low level guy. He was leading a whole division himself. In fact, his main competitor, the third market division at the company, like that was their biggest competitor. Do you know who it was? Literally Bernie Madoff. That was like the guy who was leading the division at the other company he was competing with, right? It's kind of ironic. But the reason I brought it up was because they described this conversation when he, without going into all the details, when he decided, hey, this idea of creating this everything store starting with books online is this really cool idea. It's gonna, there's reasoning why. He went to his boss, the guy who started the company, D.E. Shaw, and told him what he was gonna do. He's like, I'm leaving, I'm gonna go do this. And it was funny because they described that the guy was like, I get it. He was like, that's why I created this company. Because his boss was like working at a Morgan Stanley or whatever. I think it was Morgan Stanley. And then was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to create my own thing. Right. So he did the same thing. But the reason I brought up is because he said to him, well, one, you have a good job here, though. He was kind of trying to get him to stay, obviously. Right. He was like, you have a good job here, but also you're probably going to end up competing with us. Right. And he made that point. Right. And one of the things they talk about in the book is how Amazon's partners, they compete with them as well. It's like this weird relationship with all of their partners. They bring them in, and then it's like, you're not sure if Amazon's going to fucking destroy you. You see what I'm saying? And so I'm not, the technology of Amazon and everything they're doing from that perspective is really cool, but it's not being done in a way that it's going to be best for everybody. That's not the starting point of it, because it could already be moving towards that. That's not the system we live in, though. So it's not I'm judging from the perspective of I can say whether it's best or not, but I also understand it's within the system. So if you're going to dominate within the system, then there's going to be certain things that you're going to have to do, right? If you're going to compete in those particular areas. So when you look at it, is he going to challenge the system? Well, the very nature of Amazon itself is not, hey, this is a way everybody can become equal, is it? That's not the point of it. That's why our starting point is totally different. So if I had within me that point that would have done what Jeff Bezos would have done, I would have gone that same route. I would have done that. But there was all these little points within my foundation because of my childhood and so forth that it's like I wouldn't have had the self-discipline, emotional stability to, if I had stayed in that trajectory, be where Jeff Bezos is at and handle that. So for me, my process is to build those points within myself for myself. In other words, to recreate myself. Because let me put it this way, Jeff Bezos didn't create himself. He was pre-programmed by the system. It's a lot of hard work and he's self-disciplined, but a lot of it has come naturally to him. It happened whether he was going to go along with it or not. Right. And I'm not saying like I'm better than him or anything like that. I'm just saying you can look at the result of what he's done. And it's funny because I just saw this article. I haven't gone into the depth of it, but I just saw a thing where they're trying to say Amazon doesn't want their union, their workers are trying to vote about unionizing, I think, and they don't want them to be able to do mail-in voting. You see this, right? I haven't looked at all the details of it, but if it's true, which it sounds like on the surface it might be, it's kind of ironic.
It is.
Considering Washington Post, which he owns, and all these points, we're pushing all those points with regards to the last election and so forth. Right? But I'm only pointing out to say there's no principle within it, right? Amazon is going to destroy tons of jobs, tons of industries. And he has this saying in the book where he says to people, Amazon didn't happen to your company. The future happened to it. So he's like hiding behind, this is just the future. It's not me and my decisions and our company and everything we're doing. It's the future. It was going to happen inevitably.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think Amazon's starting point or Jeff Bezos' starting point is in like building more and more and more, like just as a speculation? Because like if you look at like Bill Gates, his starting point, or in reading like Steve Jobs's biography, like he wanted to create something innovative, right? Whereas with Bill Gates, it was more like he just seemed like he just wanted to make money. right? Because everything that he was making wasn't so much innovative. It was just like dominating the market,
Right.
right? Or it wasn't the best thing necessarily.
Yeah. Making stuff that didn't work, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what their starting point is, unless you want to add more.
One more, Elon Musk. It seems like his starting point is just to get to Mars. like I just want to die on Mars. I don't care about that. You know,
It's almost like he got programmed really hard as a child with like all these fear around like stuff that was going to happen, and he's like, I just got to get out of here or something, right?
Right.
The starting point is inequality. At the end of the day, it's
And I would say it's an unconscious starting point.
for sure, but it's like I'm this amazing person, and I'm not saying it's, again, it's not a conscious thing like you said, but it's like, I'm amazing. I'm here to, it's like if I wasn't here, everybody else would suffer. I'm doing something to make the world better for everybody else, but not from the perspective of everyone's equal. It's more from the starting point of, it's like trying to save everybody, trying to do something for people rather than empowering them to become equal to you, if that makes sense. And I'm not blaming
giving the man a fish instead of teaching the man to fish, like he's 2-day shipping a man a fish.
But that's kind of like the starting point of all for most entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Straight up, yeah.
2-day shipping a man.
Yeah. Like, isn't that,
you'll never learn to ship. That's funny.
yeah. Well, and even with the other entrepreneurs who are like, oh, well, I write books or I do info products or whatever. It's like, the whole starting point of that too is it's so that they can still, it's still inequality.
Yeah,
like they still want to be the center of attention.
Yeah,
Okay.
giving advice is giving a man a fish.
Juxtapose that with all the entrepreneurs who are like, I want to change the world in this way and I'm going to do this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then with like what we're doing. Right. It's like, it's really that point that you made. It's like, he sees himself as the savior, right? Or what he does as the savior, versus we're saying, no, we're not here to save you. Like, you have to do that.
Right. And all of us individually kind of looked at our own thing of like, oh, we want to make a difference like this. And then we just kept studying reality. Fuck. If I just keep doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to have any impact. Fuck. Keep studying reality. Okay, now we see how we have to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
Yeah.
but when I say have to, I mean from a matter of principle. It's like, yeah, this is the hard way, but it's the only way.
Well, and it's so blatantly obvious, like kids today, especially, and just people, our peers, like can't process information. I mean, the studies are out, it's very clear that people can't read, yet we're in the information age and it's going to keep increasing.
Okay, let's look at that for a moment. What's the technology of Amazon and the ability to direct resources is really cool. So I'm not knocking that. And it's not about I have anything against Jeff Bezos, for example. It's just, I know he's not going to do this. You see what I mean? And this, meaning educate the world, is not going to happen just because I do it. It's like I have a role to play within it, but I cannot do it myself. It's not physically possible. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? Because all I can really take responsibility for is myself and the people sort of around me here. And if each person did that, that's how you reach everybody, right? But when you look at, for example, let's just take the Amazon technology of, how it's not just Amazon, it's kind of like a whole system of things. But look at, for example, advertising, right? Online marketing, because what Amazon is a way where you can buy shit, right? But within it is their starting point, like, we want to offer the best of everything and that's it. And what we offer when someone buys it, what they're purchasing not only is best for them, but everybody in the supply chain is benefiting effectively and is able to have a real effective, dignified life because the products are priced a certain way to make sure that everyone in the supply chain is getting effectively. Versus it's like as cheap as fucking possible. And it's not Jeff Bezos's fault. He's more like the linchpin in the system of like, I'll give you what you want. Is that what you want? I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
He's not going to question that.
He's an agent.
Right? But it's funny because I just got a new phone and the day I got it, now this is, Katie ordered it for me. She did all the research on, not research, but she did all the stuff of like how to get the phone and all that stuff. Because I just told her I need a new one. So she ordered it from her own device, not from mine. And it was an online order. We didn't go into a store. I got the phone, it came in the mail. I did the transfer process, right? And then I go on my Facebook, and that day that I got it, after I installed everything, all I got, like every third, fourth post, was ads for iPhone 12 Pro cases.
Wow.
And I'm like, how the fuck does it know I need a case? Okay, so it knows I got a new phone. How does it know what phone I got? And I mean, there may be a simple explanation, like there's metadata or whatever you call it somewhere in there that Facebook knows what phone I have and so forth, right? But my point is, think of it, the starting point of all this stuff is not, hey, we're here to advertise to you what's best. It's more like, based on all the information we can see about you, what do we think you'll buy, and what's the cheapest thing we can offer you to get you? You know what I mean? It's not from the starting point of, we have this amazing technology, how can we make the world best for everybody? It's just, how can we exploit it to make a fuck ton of money and control as much as possible? You know? And so, do we use this stuff? Absolutely, obviously. What choice do you have anyways? But it's not about like, well, I'm just never going to use Amazon then. Okay, you can take that stand, but aren't you just putting yourself at a disadvantage?
Right. Like that point right there of like, okay, so we got to make our own water system and all this stuff. It's like right now you have to remain competitive if you care about making a difference. And if you're spending most of your day trying to figure out how to not use Amazon and buy your groceries, or not use Amazon and get your stuff, it's like you'll never become equal to the system.
Because the problem is, you can say, well, I'm going to create my own thing that's like that, but has these principles and so forth. Amazon's entire purpose for existence is to make sure you don't do that.
Right.
You see what I mean? So you could say, well, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it with principle. It's like, he's going to win. Try. And that's what's so cool about when you read about it. It's like, try to do it cheaper. You can't. It's not possible. And so all they're busy doing is getting everything to where it's like they're called the everything store. I want you to think about that. They don't want there to be any other stores. So where's the equality within that? So, okay, I mean, what does that not apply to? So your dream is opening up a clothing store. Nope. You won't even be allowed to compete at a certain point on Facebook or whatever with ads and so forth, because it'll be like, at this point, we don't need your revenue. We've got it under control, whatever the point is.
You're on the Amazon Web Service, like, you know.
Right, exactly. You're gone. And so then at that point, it's like, okay, so what should I, and I think you were going to go into this, but it's like, so what should you be spending your time on then? Because there's no point to try and do your own thing and compete over here and do this. Like, there's certain specific things that we need to take care of that we know, because of the way the system is structured, it's never going to happen if we don't do it. The number one point being equalizing education. You know,
yeah.
And yeah.
So we go into, you know, talking about like Max and Seneca and just some of those stories of like how Seneca and Max are not interacting from that starting point. Like, there have never been kids that are that effective that are now communicating with each other. And to just hear those kind of stories, right? So now kids like that, and hearing about Bruce's kids and just all the other kids that are involved in the network, like, as this progresses and goes on, these are the types of problems that are going to be clear, especially for these younger kids to be like, oh, well, right, that's what we have to do. but it's like, and to your point about equalizing education, is where that becomes normal. So that by the time, you know, Max and Seneca, you know, that age of kids, or when I, you know, after I have kids and then they have kids, where that's like normal, that these people are this effective.
You know what that just made me think of? Like, do you remember, I think it was Facebook, but they created these AI, right? And the AI, both of the AI started talking to each other in this language that they
I didn't know if
created.
that was real or not, but I would not be surprised if it was.
Right. And then they were just like, we didn't understand what the language that they created, so we just unplugged it because we weren't sure what was going to happen, right?
AI, Pig Latin, yeah.
Yeah. But consider this, right? Because you just made this point of like Max and Seneca communicating at this level more effectively than any other person has been raised, right? Imagine the entire next generation being raised that way, where they're effectively communicating at that level. Our generation, the generations that come before, they're not going to be able to understand
Right.
It's not going to make sense. It's like, and that's what I'm thinking of when we've listened to that audio with Bernard talking about like the first wave, second wave, third wave, right? It's like we can't even see or comprehend at that level, at least not yet.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm grateful for the capacity of the human being. Go ahead, Mitch.
yeah, well, yeah, and that's why TechnoTutor is essential in this, because it's still going to come back to words that have definitions, and that's how we're going to communicate. But it's going to be building that vocabulary and continually building it. So so by the time you're 20, you're not done learning. It's like, nope, just the next phase of learning, right? Until it's like this never-ending thing, really.
Yeah.
And the when we say equalizing education, everybody should be able to operate at the capacity of Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. Not do the same thing. I said operate at the capacity or processing ability or management ability of everything around them as Jeff Bezos. Even beyond that, because Bill Gates did a good job in his relationship. Jeff Bezos didn't, is my understanding, right? So the point being that equalizing, when you say the thing that we should focus on is equalizing education, it's like that's the only way that you'll be able to compete with Jeff Bezos. Now, at this point, if you try to do it on your own, it's too late. Like maybe a decade ago, 2 decades ago.
It wouldn't have even worked anyway, because they would have come by and crushed it.
Right. Right. Exactly. Right?
And you would have wasted a shitload of time.
Right. Exactly. So that's why what this process is about, all of us together as a species. But first, just those of you listening to this, it's about being able and learning how to work effectively in a group where we all become coordinated by principle, so that every limb that we add to this principled living is spreading that point. Because Amazon is a literal giant, right? And in order to, if I could sum up process, it's like, or like what we're here to do, it's like convince everybody to play a different game, right? It's like we're here to convince everybody to play a different game. The game that you're playing, you don't even like it, and there is an alternative, right? The amount of people that we have to reach in order to do that effectively, where people are like, okay, yeah, I'll vote for that. That's the end game. But in order to get there, the hottest commodity right now is you. It's literally fucking you listening to this right now. It's literally you as an individual building your network and sharing these points with other people, but doing it for yourself, so that just like Cameron is to his kids, you are becoming somebody worth listening to. Now, the biggest fucking mistake that everybody does, they think they need to be Jeff Bezos. They think they have to be at the end of their process, right? And I see this a lot with, for example, people in Destiny. And there's one particular person who got it recently, right? Cameron, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like he was walking his process for a while. All of you know who I'm talking about. But it's like he was walking his process for 10, 12 years. And it was just kind of like, what do I do now? What do I do? And we're going to get on a call together. And once we had gotten on the call, he had said, you know, it's funny, what came up inside of me is the same thing that fucked me over a long time ago. Why I never really pushed myself to expand is because I felt like I had to write out all the points before getting on the call. So I almost didn't get on the call. I have to be perfect before I can talk to somebody. I have to be a millionaire before I can share. I have to be the perfect parent, and my kid has to turn 20 and to prove that he's a good example. And then I can share. That's not the case. It's not the case at all. And if that's the way Jeff Bezos thought, well, it's backwards, because then you'll never get there. So the point being, go ahead, Jake.
You know what just came up within me when you were saying that, right? It's like, if you look at any super successful person, any super wealthy person that you wish you had their money or whatever, you wish, like, have you ever had the thought, because I know this was a prevalent thought for me, you know, it's like, man, if I would have just known them when they were getting started,
right? Yeah.
I could have just known, like I could have hopped on, I could have seen it, you know, I could have gotten up with them, right? Like what you're sharing is like what Cam has done is given us the opportunity of like as he's growing, you know, Max and Seneca, you know, just like, hey, this is gonna be big. You guys want to be a part of this, and
The biggest, really.
legit, it is, you know.
And it's funny because at the very beginning, like go back to when they didn't even have kids yet, right? It's like, I don't know, dude. I can't really see it. It was really good for me, but like, good luck. Entrepreneur, like, you know, like the classics, right? But
Entrepreneur, is that what you said?
entrepreneur,
I never heard that.
I never
Oh,
actually.
you never heard
that?
that? Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, it's hilarious.
It's something that the young folks say. I believe you have to be under 30 to. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, it's like now it's so clear. And the point, really what this is all about is, why did I get to the point where I'm at now, where by my own self-assessment, because we're always usually going to be the first people. Now everybody thinks we're egotistical assholes, right? But we're always going to be the first people to shit on ourselves, to say that we're not as far as we could be, right? But by my own self-assessment, for the first time I can say, I'm proud of myself. Honestly, I'm still obviously just beginning, and I see all my flaws and all the things I got to work on, but I'm like, dude, I'm kind of proud of myself. And I don't need that from somebody else anymore. I could give that to myself. But my point was, this point where I'm at, even so, like, what I consider like literally just like the beginning, like we're still like a fetus, like just like we just, you know, how did I get here? It's because there was somebody that I saw that was worth listening to. Or somebody that I saw was worth listening to, not just because they had all the flashy shit. This is why Technotutor is so fundamental. And this is why principles are so fundamental. If you can't process information, you won't understand why standing for principles is important. And if you can't process information, you are going to be stimulated and pulled every which way. For example, before the podcast came on, like I'm assuming we're looking at, you know, we were looking into Mitch's garage and we were making the joke of, you know, here in my garage, like Ty Lopez, right? How many people thought that if I give money to the 67 Steps program, they're going to get rich, right? What was that, Karen? Did you say
That's
something?
a lot of steps.
Yes.
They just keep drawing it out so you never realize until like years later, like, oh, these steps aren't going anywhere.
And so the point is, how many people have invested into all these programs thinking, oh yeah. I'm gonna make money. I'm going to be able to do it, all this stuff. Not realizing that's not the answer. You're the answer, right? Where the point is, it took me a while because we didn't have everything we have now. But I was like, dude, Cameron, David, you guys are saying some real shit. But Cameron, had I met you, so I met probably like 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. If I met you 10 years before that, how would that have went? What would have been my impression of you?
Yeah. I don't think you would have even talked to me.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, it's like you made this really cool point about how you're proud of yourself, right? That's real self-esteem. You know, because there's also humility within that, like real true humility, not just like, oh no, I'm not so great. It's like, no, you are, like you understand something now, right? You're effective when you speak to people. So that doesn't mean you have to pretend that you're not somewhere you aren't yet, but it's that just that basic point of like, okay, I trust myself now. I'm clear what I need to do just in terms of principle, like where I'm going. I understand that I'm here to do what's best. Like just being clear on those points, that's why people would listen to you. It's not because you have billions of dollars. if someone's listening to you only because you have billions of dollars, like there's two people selling two opposite competing products that both have billions of dollars. So you can't listen to both of them. You know what I mean? Like if that's the only reason you're doing it, then how do you discern within that? And so for someone listening to this where it's like, well, I'm not where I think I should be at for people to listen to me. It's just becoming clear within yourself about who you really are and what you're here to do. Within that, people will start listening to you because that's what they're looking for ultimately. The only reason why they're trying to follow these people with money and so forth is because they're totally fucking lost and they're just trying to survive. And you can show them like, hey, there's a way we can guarantee everyone's survival. And that's the only way you can guarantee your own. It's like the actual reality of it.
Mm.
You see what I mean?
And you can become very wealthy doing it.
Become very wealthy, have great relationships, have children that you adore and adore you because it makes sense to, not because you've demanded it or beaten it into them or something like that.
Respect. You have to respect your elders.
That's how people will listen to you, right? Because you're standing as a point of certainty and clarity in a world that's crumbling before our eyes. Like we're all seeing it. And if you're not seeing it, you're like, oh no, what are you talking about? I see a lot of order in society. And it's like, yeah, that's very temporary. It's only going to be a matter of time before people, just like you described in that book, are like, they can't take it anymore. It's like, like one of you was making this really cool point because you said it like it was kind of obvious to you. I think it was before we started recording. Remember Asif? And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that, about people being locked down.
Oh, right. Like
in terms of like, what was that point you were seeing of like what obviously people are going through within that?
And Drake, did you want to mention that point? Because it's really cool. It's really
the shadow work point. Right?
Yeah. That
Why are people going after that one?
Yeah, because like it's the same thing. Like because we were talking about before how micro schools. It's the same. It's it's virtually the same as homeschooling, right? But people are more open to that because it's got a different connotation to it. People are very averse to like homeschooling or certain words, And so
they've been programmed to think that it's weird.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, literally, it's the same fucking thing. Like, oh, micro schooling. Okay, cool. It's like, so.
I don't like mini schooling though. Micro schooling only.
You're doing it from home. Like, yeah, like that. You mean like homeschooling? Oh, no, not homeschooling. It's like, okay, just don't talk about
that. Right. And so I see the new thing that's going on right now is shadow work, right? And it's not a new thing. It's coined by Carl Jung,
Because people say that if it's self-help, it's a cult.
Right.
You see? So they just change the wording of it so it's sexy and cool. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing
work.
I'm not doing that weird self-help shit. No.
But I've been seeing a lot of people getting into shadow work recently because, well, they're by themselves. They realize they don't like themselves.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like people are saying like, hey, whoa, like how are things going for you in 2020? It's been, I'm like, oh, business is bumping. Like things are fantastic. Great. Like really amazing. Like, oh, that makes sense because you're in education, right? Like the education system is really
the whole reason why.
I'm like, yeah, but also people are like reflecting on what their life is because they have all this time now. They're in like not as much stimulus, right? It's like the moment that the 10 seconds like in between when the last Netflix episode plays and the next one, right? But they're like, what the fuck am I doing? And you're just having more and more people being like, okay, there's got to be more out there. So when somebody introduces them to a group like Self-Perfected, we're getting invites that are like, I fucking need some people in my life that are not just like, let's just simplify it, really negative from every aspect of that word. And real quick, it's like, think about however you found this group. And think about the people that found the group because you shared something, because somebody shared something. There are literally millions of people who are going into very bad habits, very destructive habits for themselves and the people around them and their community because our self-interest. And what does our self-interest look like in this context? What I'm referring to is we care more about how we feel and the scariness of making, for example, a public live video, sharing a post, sharing this podcast, right? We care more about, yeah, but what if somebody gets mad at me? What if somebody makes me feel bad? Basically, what if something happens where inside there's some feeling that I don't like? We are prioritizing that over, yeah, I know that there's people out there that might be like going into drug addiction and porn addiction and ruining their relationships and all that stuff, and maybe being more aggressive with their children and not educating them effectively because they don't have this group. But that feeling. Now, for a lot of people, that's not actually the cognitive process that you're going through. But the reason I'm saying it is, would you agree that there are people who would receive immense value from this group that you know, but who aren't in here yet? The point being, Cameron, if you go back to the origins video, the only reason why Cameron's not the antisocial fucking weirdo who's just trying to fight and feels like he's throwing his life away, which basically would have been us three, would have just been totally in the system and just really resentful and bitter and really suppressed and feel like we didn't have like, okay, cool. Like we're going along with it.
Yeah, just look at your parents and then you'll be like, oh, that's what I would have become.
Right.
You wouldn't have changed what they put into you in the first 7 years, which was a copy of them.
Now, that was based off you finding YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. Like if we really boil it down,
yeah,
the mechanic of Cameron discovering this stuff was he found YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. He was on YouTube. He saw some videos. Mm-hmm. That's the reality of it. The reason we made this self-perfected group and the podcast, and Mitch has his YouTube channel, and he's like, Asif, you should make a YouTube channel too. And I was like, man, you're right. It's just for that reason. We're not doing it. We're like, okay, yeah, we're going to be YouTubers, right? We're going to get
monetized.
Right. Like what kind of ads should we put up? Who's going to manage it? No, it's because all of this is because Cameron watched some YouTube videos. And even before that, like go through Bernard's life, like that's some other shit, right? But if we just look in the context that's simple to understand, somebody else shot some YouTube videos and they moved past the fear of, okay, and there were some weird fucking YouTube videos, right? So those people moved past the fears of, okay, people are probably going to shit on us for this. And it was probably way more than they could imagine.
Yeah.
Right. But imagine if they gave into that fear.
Yeah.
Are you being that person? And that's something that me, Mitchell, Drake, Cameron, we're asking ourselves that every fucking day. Yes or no? Like, right? We're always like, okay, yeah, because I fear it, I must do it.
Yeah.
Right?
I wake up with a thought in my mind of, am I doing the things that I would listen to? Like, am I doing the things that somebody who I would listen to would be doing? Right. And it's cool. Like, just to kind of close that point of why shadow work is even relevant, or why people are coming to you, and it's not through just education, because we're talking about actually dealing with what's inside of us.
Right. Like not education for your kid.
Right. Yeah.
Education is a lot more than people realize. So they're right, because people are coming to you for education, but not because they're like, oh, my kid's doing bad in algebra.
Right.
More like, I'm fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't educated on how the world works and how I work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Drake.
I was just going to say, it's really cool seeing that point, especially in this context right now, how many people we're actually helping and how many messages I see on a daily basis from people within our group that are just like, oh my God, I'm so glad I found you. Like, this has changed my life. On a daily basis, I'm connecting with the people that are in our group, and they're just like, no, I need this. Like,
now it's at the point where I'm getting messages from people who brought somebody else into the group, and that person is now thanking that person that I got a message from. And they're like, man, it's such a good feeling to share. It's like, yeah, the bliss of your life that everyone is looking for is equal to the amount of negativity in yourself that you're willing to face.
Yeah.
Your happiness and all that stuff in your life, everything that you want is equal to how much fear are you willing to walk through? How much negativity are you willing to go through in your life?
How many people want something that's like fulfilling? How many people want something where they can actually be appreciated? How many people want something where it's like they're actually doing something of value that is helping somebody else and you can see the physical result of it, right? And then here we are, we're doing that. And we get the appreciation, and we also, I feel fulfilled, right? But also I know that there's way more to go.
Yeah, but then also, and I know I can speak for you on this, but it's like,
and real quick, just
that.
that point, it's like when we say we mean everyone in the group. Everyone in the group, not just like the four of us. When Drake is saying we, he means like self-perfected as a whole.
Yeah, and assuming that you're actually walking the points. So if you're just there and you're not actually applying yourself within the points and being self-honest, then we're not talking about you. But you're right. We're not claiming just us four or something like that. We're saying everybody who's really participating and putting themselves into it and walking through their fears and so forth. And just to tie back to that point you said about the feeling proud of yourself, it's like when you were describing people coming into the group, they're coming there because they're looking for answers. They're not satisfied. They're realizing their life is not, there's something wrong. There's something missing. And part of the reason why you can feel good is because you know when they come in there, you're not going to take advantage of that.
Right.
You're not going to exploit it to their detriment. You're actually going to support them to see the solution to it, which is not really the solution most people are wanting to hear initially. It's like, no, I want to just pretend like I'm a good person, even though I'm here because I know I'm fucked up, but I want to pretend like I'm really great and amazing. And I just want you to reinforce that and don't ever challenge me. And it's like, well, then you're not ever going to actually be that person that you want. And so you realize, like you were saying, Drake, that point about feeling happiness and so forth, it only really is real whenever you're doing it from a starting point of giving to other people. So you're getting something back automatically. So that feeling of fulfillment you're getting is what you get within yourself as you've actually given to other people. What most of us have been trying to do our whole life was to try to do something and get happiness from it. But the thing we were doing was, the starting point was just to get happiness. It wasn't like, what's a problem I actually need to solve that helps everybody? And then if you focus on that primarily, guess what? You get that feeling of fulfillment automatically. You don't have to go get it somehow. And you can't actually get it without giving. And so the first point of realizing how can I be someone people will listen to is, firstly, become aware of who you really are. Because when you're aware of who you really are, you are the ability to just change, the ability to take on a new principle. You can decide that for yourself. And then you can start holding yourself to that. Because when you do that, you start sharing with other people at that point. Not even necessarily you have the result yet, just sharing that this is what I'm about now. People start to hear that supports them. You see what I mean? And that in itself is the starting point of giving. And people are looking for that. You see what I mean? That's all you have to start with. You don't have to start with, oh, I got to make all this money first and then people will listen to me. Because again, like I said earlier, then they're listening to you for the wrong reason. Now, the more money you make, people will also listen to you. So it's not to say like you don't ever need to make more money, but that'll just be different people who listen to you at a new level. Like,
it'll just get easier.
Yeah, well, like Jeff Bezos is not going to listen just based on the principle. He's going to like, oh, do you have $1 billion? I'm not listening to you otherwise. Yeah. Most likely. Do you see what I'm saying? So if your goal is, well, I want to just get to Jeff Bezos and tell him about how Amazon can be used in a way that's best for everybody. Well, unless you're at the level where he's going to listen to you, meaning you have the things he wants, do you see what I mean? Or he sees you as an equal in that context, most likely he's not going to listen. So don't focus on, I need to go talk to whoever that person you're idolizing is. What you should rather focus on is, okay, how can I within myself accept the principles that would actually make this world better, and then just start speaking to others about them, and then holding myself to that standard when I can see I'm falling short, and changing myself. And that's why self-forgiveness is important. So when you fall short, you don't go, "Ah, I did it again. Ah, I'm just always such an idiot. I always do that." It's like, no, you just forgive yourself. And you might go through that little cycle. And you might go through a year-long cycle where you're just not focused. And then you realize, and you're like, "Oh, fuck, what have I been doing? Let me stop. Let me start over. Let me come back to my principles." And what I'm saying is, it's that process of just going back to your principles and starting from there. You don't need anyone to listen to you for any other reason than that for now.
So I want to nail that home because you said it really simply and really quickly that it might be passed off as not ultra significant, but everyone's looking to become. Everybody thinks who they are is like, oh, I'm supposed to be this and this and this. But basically, what you said was, what you are is the ability to change. So if you've seen in yourself, not that you've changed everything about yourself, it's that within yourself, you're like, okay, I've shifted. Things are a little different. And nothing has been different for the last 20 years for you. That's what that point is. And you can see the longevity of, oh, there's other people have been doing the exact same thing that I'm doing now, and they've changed even more. So math tells me if I just keep doing this, I'll change even more. You understanding that you are simply equal to your ability to change, right? Your ability, what Cameron said was your ability to just adopt a new principle. You don't need anything else. And I've experienced that in my own life. Mitchell has experienced that in his own life. Drake, Cameron, and I think Cameron's the funniest example of it because of who he was at the very beginning, right? He talks about when we were on our last call before this, right? He was talking about the first time he made a live video. What was that? What did that look like, Cameron? He's shaking.
It's just funny because it's like when I see somebody who's kind of new to looking at these points, I look at them and I'm like, that's me. And I know I'm effective. I know I'm not fucking Martin Luther King Jr., right? Because that's a skill set that you develop, right? So it's not like I'm trying to say like I have this certain skill level. It's more like I know what I'm capable of, and I know that I have a certain level of effectiveness. So like you said, it's like recognizing that, being aware of that, but not pretending that you're something you're not. But when I look back at where I was at, it's not really so much that any skill has really changed. I don't even know that I've developed that much more skill. It's more a point of not being afraid and like not looking for some kind of recognition. And when those points come up, being honest with myself about it. And sometimes somebody has to maybe point it out so I can be like, oh fuck. So it's not a point of, oh, I'm done. Okay, good. I'm good. I'm perfect. It's the way it is. It's realizing I've perfected myself to this point. Now, how can I keep pushing myself? Because being a billionaire is a responsibility, right? People like they look at the private jet and the Bentley and all this stuff, and it's like those are nice things, but there's no billionaires that are billionaires just so they can have those things, and they just get those things and they're like, cool, I'm a billionaire now, I got those things, and that's it. Like
the private jet is like they have to get to a fucking meeting like ASAP or else they're gonna like
right, they're like, man, I need a private jet. I can't fucking be waiting in security. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like even I was listening, I think it was it Bill Gates or was it Jeff Bezos or somebody? It was some specific person like that where they were like,
was it Mayor Billionaire? Shout out.
Yeah, no, they waited a long time before they got a private jet. I think it was Bill Gates. Like he flew coach or whatever, just normal plane, like for a long time until it was like he splurged and got a private jet or whatever. But
Steve Jobs.
Was it Steve Jobs?
Steve Jobs, like when he came back to Apple, He was like, I don't really need a big salary,
Oh yeah.
but like he negotiated with the board, like, but we do want to fly private, you know?
Yeah. But see what I'm saying though? Like, so those things become tools, right? And when you look at these rappers and all these people that have stuff like that, a lot of times they don't really even own it necessarily. It's like the label owns it because they know it's marketing because they're going to get everybody to buy their stuff or whatever. But and this is important to understand too, because those people who believe that they're spiritual and they're like, I don't need money, right? Well, then you're not making a difference because
it's just
you're
fake.
not influencing other people. Because if you were, like, how do you tangibly see that you're making a difference? And the only way you could justify it is if you believe by you feeling good and positive, somehow that magically affects the world around you.
Which it does not.
It doesn't. Like, oh, if I smile at people, they'll smile more. It's like, well, they'll smile on their way to their fucking shitty dead-end job. It didn't change anything, right? And how do you think about that today? How are you going to do that now? Everyone's wearing a fucking mask.
Yeah, I can't smile at people anymore. The elites were like, oh shit, I think they're actually making a difference by smiling.
I'll just put a heart on my mask, right?
Exactly. Put a smiley face on your mask.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who wants to close it out? Because I think we've covered all the points.
That last point that to be like make really clear is making money isn't respectable within and of itself. That won't be the reason why people listen to you. Because there are a lot of people who are making 250, 500K a year that nobody listens to them. $1 million, nobody listens to them. And the point being that that's not why people will listen to you. Don't get fooled by that. There will be certain people who listen to you because of that. There will be certain people who listen to you because you're brown like them. Like there'll be certain people who listen to you because you also play soccer. That's not important. The
Plus,
main reason, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Asif. I just want to put this in there real quick. You'll become rich because people are listening to you. Does that make sense?
Right.
Not when you get rich, they'll listen to you.
Yes. That's what everybody has.
Become rich because people are listening and you're directing them to solutions and you're measuring that by the fact that they're paying you for that. Right. So then the point is, like we were starting off with and really expanding within this episode, is like, what do you start now? Just ask yourself right now why you can't do what's best for all. Why can't you talk to other people? Because most people, do they even think it's possible that you can determine what's best for all, much less that we can have a world that is best for all? Start with that.
Right.
And then look at your relationships and ask yourself, where do I feel inadequate? Where do I feel less than? Where am I judging myself? And then ask yourself, are you giving as you want to receive? Or are you just expecting something and then complaining? Right? Those would be the most important points to start. And then really, it's like you could just make a video where you take one of the principles that we have on the website and then study it for yourself and then start talking about why it makes sense and handling all the objections you can imagine people coming up with. I'm just giving you an example. So it's not like you need to come up with like all these amazing things. It's not like, well, I got to find these really amazing points to share with people. It's like, just start with the basic points, because maybe I can say it and no one will hear me, or some people won't listen to me, but you say it and that other person who didn't listen to me will listen to you.
Right.
Before you know it, people will be listening and they'll be applying it. And before you know it, you'll feel better and your life will start changing in front of your eyes, because you'll start taking more responsibility. Because the reason why the whole world is the way it is because most people aren't taking responsibility for it. So the few people like Jeff Bezos are, but then they get to determine everything. So you don't have a right to complain. So your life will start growing and changing in proportion to the things you take responsibility for, starting with the relationships around you and starting with the relationship within yourself. Because whenever you are feeling good about yourself, people will listen to you. So speak and walk through all the resistances and the fears so you can eliminate those. Because as you do, you'll start to feel more. You'll start to feel better. You'll start to feel like you're really who you really are, not the projection of who you want to be, where you're constantly judging yourself. You'll feel like, damn, I actually don't have as much fear anymore. And people will look at you and go, wow, I want to be like you.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone was like that, the fucking world would be totally different. People wouldn't be responding to all these different things happening with fear and then therefore being manipulated because they're afraid. That alone would change everything. What were you going to say, Mitch?
Oh, that's 1 + 1. right? Like
Exactly.
that's the change. And Cameron, one time you told me this quote, because I'm coming from the world of internet marketing and how do we make viral videos and do the ads and scale it and get in front of this many eyeballs and engagement and all that shit, right? And you just told me one day, you sent me this message. You said the slow way is you said the slow way is the short way. Because I was looking for the shortcut. It's like, how do we get there quicker? And you're like, this is how. It's this slow way that I was perceiving as slow of, oh, I have to go talk to real people, have real conversations, support them one-on-one. But now I realize, holy shit, I'm so glad I've done that over the past year and a half. That's how you get real change. And then those 10, 20 people then go find 10 to 20 more people. And that's how it truly ripples out.
You're primarily focused on changing yourself, and you use the feedback of people aren't listening to me, or I'm having less influence than I want, as okay, what do I need to change about myself, as big points.
Mm-hmm.
And then also looking at relationships in your life, and that process of change is what's necessary. So if you try to skip that by just get 1,000 people to just watch this video, it's like, but if they're not changing, then whatever your quick way is, ultimately we're still going to have to all go back to that same point anyways. So that's why we say it is the short way, because you focus on yourself and the people you can influence, and then start expanding that and teaching them to do that. You're influencing them to realize they need to change themselves.
Because remember what Cameron said about parenting? It's like, you need to use Technotutor. You also need somebody there with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like people need to hear directly, like where they're fucking up.
That's it's not just get 1 million people right now to buy Technotutor. It's get people who want to change, who see the value of changing and want to change themselves, and then support them to do the steps necessary. And then once you got them kind of on their feet, go find another person. Because if you don't do that, if you try to skip that part of the person actually seeing, I need to change, then whatever thing you did is going to collapse. And we're going to have to start back at that same point anyways. So there is no shortcut.
So
and what most people are looking for, what most people are looking for is something to happen. I had somebody the other day telling me, I sent it to Drake, I won't say who it is, but they sent to me this thing saying that the sun had changed. It was no longer the current sun that it was before. And it's now a portal to another dimension. And all these alien spaceships have come through, and they represent this force that's going to fight the deep state, and that they're going to access all this money, and they're going to give everybody money. So we don't need to do anything we're doing.
Dude, you should have sent me that audio before the podcast. I wouldn't have come on. That would have been sick. I don't have to.
We could have just replaced the podcast with that message.
You see how that's still a savior? You see how that's still a savior complex?
Of course.
If something else is going to happen in reality, I don't need to change. Finally. You know what that really is? It's greed. It's like, I want to benefit, but I don't want to change myself. Because what did we say this whole time? You need to change yourself, so you give. That's the starting point of who you are. Because when you do that, you get all the happiness, all the stuff you're looking for. If you do that within the context of what we're talking about, your relationships will improve, your finances, all that kind of stuff. Everything you're looking for anyways in the system, you can do if you change your starting point. How is that different than what Jesus was saying? Give as you want to receive. The problem is, if you don't know who you are, how can you give? You see what I'm saying? Because people, oh, Jesus, give as you want to receive. Okay, I'll give money to the beggar. It's like, no. What did Socrates say? Know yourself, right? You have to know yourself. You have to get to that point where you understand who you are, which is life, which is like we were saying earlier, you can change. If you're like, oh, nope, it's too late, the world is the way it is, you're dead. Do you understand that? You're not alive anymore. You're just an empty husk. You're a robot. There's nothing left. That's not how children are. You know what I mean? Children are full of life, and they're just having fun all the time.
I love this episode. It's so good.
It's the best one yet. People saying, Drake was telling me, people were saying, oh, the last one was the best one. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay.
They're going to keep saying that. If I could sum up that point in a principle of, or just to connect the dots really, of thinking that you need to get rich, or thinking that you need some results more than you already have right now. You know, I don't have my story yet. I had my story this whole time, and I didn't have my story in my head because I just didn't look at it. So you have your story. If you're listening, if you can listen to this, you have your story. Okay. My point is, if you can sum that up in a principle, you're trying to get before you give. You're trying to say, I have to have all the stuff first, and then I'll start sharing with people.
That's the law of attraction.
Right. It's the
Dude,
opposite.
that's such a good point. That's such a good point.
I nailed it, right?
You nailed it. You nailed it.
I just realized.
It's the fire that wants, it's like, oh, first give me fire, then I'll give you wood. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right?
The furnace that, yeah, exactly.
You're not here to attract, right?
Yeah.
You're here to create. But before you can do that, you have to change who you are. So your starting point is where you want what's best for everybody. Otherwise, what are you going to create? Just look around. It's a collective. And the people that you need to be worried about is not Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. It's your next door fucking neighbor.
Right.
Jesus said, he didn't go, love Caesar as you love yourself. He said, love your neighbor.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You need to consider the fact that you're not supporting them to realize who they are. That's why we're here on this planet. It's for that reason and that reason alone, is to change ourselves and to support others to realize that they can do it too. And there's nothing to be afraid of. But we have to create that. It doesn't already exist. That's the thing. We've never matured. It's our time now to actually mature as a human race, as beings, whatever you want to call it.
And so if you haven't figured out the way that you can provide for yourself, provide for your family, provide for the people around you, and have a real impact in this world, you got to message up. We're not going to tell you.
You got to go on the
you got to message Mitch, Drake, me, Kian. You got to message us directly.
Don't message me.
Yeah, don't message Karen. Anyways, he's got.
I'm serious. I will ignore you. I'll just send you over there to them.
And so the point is, look at that point for you of where you're projecting about who you have to be in order to be someone worth listening to, and forgive that, let that go, because it's not true. It's not real. And the reason I was bringing up Cameron as being a great example of that, it's like, he didn't really have anything before. At the very beginning, right? It's like, you're just starting, you're like bald, like, you really.
I worked at Walmart
Right.
for 6 months to be able, or 9 months or something, to be able to afford a plane ticket to go to South Africa to meet Bernard.
Right.
I didn't have anything when I left and when I came back, right, with Katie, except I had what? Principles. Right? And that was just the beginning of it. I didn't even know what they really meant completely. All I knew is like, I'm here to make a difference. And then that began the process of, oh, I have to change myself because no one's listening to me.
Right. So just be willing, just become equal to Cameron. Right. I'm grateful for what you and Avery did, because you guys had to walk through way more than we'll probably have to walk. I don't know. But you guys had to walk through a lot.
Collectively have to walk through a lot.
Exactly.
So it's not about me or anything like that. It's just about the principles. It's about what's best for everybody.
And the point is, like, wherever in yourself, you're like, oh shit, these 4 guys, like, oh man, it's like, take that and live that as yourself. That's what I do with each of these 3 guys, among the other people who I see as my mentors, even though we're equals, but it's like, I'm learning from them from that perspective, right? I'm learning from everybody all the time, or any point inside of me that's like, oh, I wish I was like that. Anything like that, it's like, okay, I am that now. I put it through my techno tutor. I forgive myself for thinking that I can't be like that for some reason. And then I do it. And so in this regard, look at where you're limiting your expression, your willingness to share, and your assumption that you're somebody not worth listening to. Because if you can hear this podcast, that's total bullshit. It's 100% total bullshit. Because the same way you respect the other people in this group who are posting in the group and posting their videos and pushing themselves, it's the exact same reason why someone will respect you. Mm-hmm. So don't wait. And Mitchell, you want to hit him with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Of
course. So become someone worth listening to. Join the group, because you can't do it alone. Join us on the next Self-Perfected Hangout. Do the video challenges so that other people can actually see what it is that you're about. Go to selfperfected.com. That's self-perfected.com. Check out our store. We have new items in there occasionally, so check those out. Rep the gear, so every time you look in the mirror, you can be reminded of the principles that you stand for. Go on our website, check out the other podcasts, and then share it with other people. Because right now, the average person is being impulsed by CNN or NBC or BBC or whatever the mainstream thing is to live in fear. But do you want to live in a world where your neighbors are constantly in fear and you can't even trust them? Or do you want to live in a world where we can actually get together and do what's best and then actually like have fun here and create cool shit? But first, we got to make sure that everyone has their basic needs met. We do that through joining Self-Perfected and then being part of the solution, which is equalizing education and changing the whole system. So thanks, everybody. That was this week. See you next week.
See you later.
Bye.